In a time where big AAA studios put out some of the best games of their entire history, one of the biggest companies, Rockstar Games, blessed the world with their new IP, Red Dead Redemption. Rockstar Games, also known for series like Max Payne, Manhunt, Midnight Club, The Warriors, or most prominently Grand Theft Auto, was founded in New York City in 1998 by Sam and Dan Houser, Terry Donovan, Jamie King, and Gary Foreman. Over the years, Rockstar acquired and founded many studios, mainly all across North America and Europe, and integrated them into their company, like Rockstar London, which is responsible for the Manhunt games, or Rockstar San Diego, former Angel Studios, which is responsible for Red Dead Redemption, its spiritual predecessor Red Dead Revolver, and the former mentioned Midnight Club series. The development has probably started around 2005, because a very early tech demo was shown at Sony's E3 conference. So it took Rockstar San Diego around 5 years to finalize Red Dead Redemption for its release in 2010. The game takes place in fictional parts of the United States and Mexico that are inspired by states like New Mexico and Texas, but also the western United States and western Mexico. The various influences naturally result in a huge variety of sceneries, ranging from deserts and small villages or settlements to lush forests, a city, swamps, and mountainous regions that are always filled with points of interest of various sizes. Inhabited are these environments by 38 different species of animals, with, in some cases, several subspecies that can all be hunted or caught as well. On top of that, the world is inhabited by a huge variety of pretty detailed NPCs, especially for a 15-year-old game, with the occasional world event like a horseback chase or a robbery happening and adding to the feeling of immersion. And the open worlds are what Rockstar Games are famous for, and rightfully so. They always put one on top of another, and probably will in the future as well. And I would love to tell you that the game's graphics are quite impressive for the time. But even though I'm actually a fan of this brownish-grey style of the time, mainly because it's my childhood, the environments, especially the desert areas, and there are a lot of those, are really tough to look at nowadays. And to be honest, outside of missions, I very rarely went on and explored the environments, unless I was near a city or a bit more interesting nature like a forest. But the heart of an open world game, like any video game, is and always was the gameplay. In Red Dead Redemption, this contains of several things. For one, like in Rockstar's most popular franchise, the different types of transportation. And why they exist in the game and are part of some missions. In this game, you never get to drive the very early car models yourself. Instead, besides some wooden wagons, there are 24 different types of horses to choose from to get around. And a good horse really can make a difference when it comes to the question how annoying it can be to get from point A to point B. Because different horses have different stats for pace and stamina, which can really make a huge difference outside, but also inside of missions, of course. And there are a lot of those where horses play a part, like all kinds of chases, for example. But the real main dish of Red Dead Redemption's gameplay is definitely the combat, which consists of hand-to-hand or melee combat, and all kinds of firearms for ranged combat that itself ranges from cover shooter sections to horseback shootouts. And while the combat isn't really the most unique besides the Deadeye mechanic that allows you to slow time, mark several targets and quickly mow them down, you actually have a somewhat big arsenal of weapons to send anything you want to meet their makers. Beginning with your fist and a rope, which are the least lethal options in the game, and a hunting knife for the classic London handshake. Further, there are some tools that can be thrown, like throwing knives, dynamite, and a firebomb called Firebottle. But where the weapon arsenal really shines is when projectiles join the fight. Beginning with the mounted weapons like a Gatling gun or the cannon, followed by rifles, handguns, and shotguns that add up to around 60 different firearms. And while a sheer number of weapons isn't really impressive in itself, when finding a new gun feels like finding a nice sword in an RPG, because of how unique every one of them feels, you have done a great job as a developer. Now, everyone that ever played a Rockstar game knows that one aspect that makes them feel so alive is the variety of side activities. And Red Dead Redemption is no exception to that rule. So besides making holes into bad guys, John Marston can take part in several minigames and jobs, like taming wild horses, patrolling a town as a night watch, gambling, like poker, blackjack and liar's dice, arm wrestling, and horseshoe throwing. On top of that, you also can participate in challenges where you have to collect or hunt treasure, animals or plants, or shoot targets. Further, there are also the more repetitive side quests like bounty hunting and clearing bandit camps and gang hideouts for some quick cash. And last but definitely not least, one of my favorite side activities, the Stranger Missions, where you experience unique little stories about random people in the world, and those are actually worth it most of the time. With my favorite being the one called The Wronged Woman, where you meet a pregnant woman in the Blackwater church who claims that her boss seduced her and abandoned her when he found out she was pregnant with his child. But after John duels him for money, he is informed that the pregnant lady has lied to him and he, or we the player, killed an innocent man. In terms of music, Red Dead Redemption's soundtrack is nothing too special in my opinion. It mainly consists of instrumentals to support the Western theme. Responsible for the soundtrack are the composers Bill Elm and Woody Jackson, with a few additional ones created by external artists. Now before we come to the story section, I want to give you the chance to skip to the timestamp shown on the screen right now. The game begins with a group of people including John Marston and 2 government officials arriving in Blackwater by boat. They guide him towards a train station where they watch him get on the train and leave. He arrives at Armadillo Station, a small place with nothing really around. He immediately heads into the town saloon, where he meets up with the white-haired, out-of-shape, tough-to-look-at old man named Jake. The two make their way towards Fort Mercer, where John confronts his former comrade Bill, who shoots him. John then gets picked up by Bonnie McFarlane, who gets him treated on her farm. When he regains consciousness, John offers to help around the farm to pay her back. He mainly helps by protecting the farm for a while. A few days pass until Bonnie asks John to accompany her to Armadillo. After helping her with buying some supplies, John leaves to ask the local sheriff for help with making a new attempt on capturing Bill. The sheriff tells him that he would need some time to get more info before they could get to John's former ally. After that, John helps him with dealing with some bandits before the two part ways for now. Back at the McFarlane farm, John continues his work until Bonnie McFarlane had enough of John keeping secrets. And the two get into an argument until John finally explains that he used to have a daughter that passed away, and that he used to ride and rob banks and trains with a gang that Bill also has been part of. After hearing that, her mood switches and the two begin to tell each other about their life and especially their problems. Following that, John is back to farm work. Here, along the way, we get introduced to bounties and how to pay them off, and stranger missions in general. Back in Armadillo, he once again helps Marshal Lee Johnson to deal with some bandits. When the last bandit has been dealt with, Sheriff Johnson once again promises to do anything he can do to help with John's hunt for Bill Williamson. Back again at McFarlane Farm, we get introduced to Mr. McFarlane, Bonnie's father, who shows John how to tame wild horses. Next up, we get introduced to one of the most exotic characters, or even for this game's standards, the traveling merchant Wes Dickens, who we find in bad shape at the side of the road. Dickens asks John to bring him to Armadillo, where the two arrive after fighting off some of the men that attacked Dickens in the first place. While Dickens gets his wounds treated, John is helping the sheriff with another bandit extermination. This time, those bandits are not only robbing, but killing people and worse. After getting most of the unhuman beings at a farm where they are already in the process of murdering an entire family and their helpers, they track down the rest of the lowlifes not far away, and it turns out that no other than Bill is behind those murder sprees. Bill sends his men to attack and flee himself, but because one of his men gets captured alive, John still has a chance to finally get Bill soon. But first, it's time to help the McFarlanes save a herd from a storm. Later, Mr. McFarlane seems to be missing, so Bonnie and John go look for him. They find him next to the corpse of a person and his horse. He suspects the Bollard twins to be behind the crime and asks John to escort his daughter back home. When they arrive, to their horror, they discover that one of their barns is on fire and the horses are trapped inside. John manages to climb in through the roof and all animals can be brought to safety. With the fires put out, Bonnie expresses her gratitude and the two make a deal that if John gets his own farm, she helps him out with some cattle. Now that things calm down again, John runs into Wes Dickens, who asks John to help him with one of his scammy sales shows. The show is a success even though John had to fight a man who called out the scam, and the thankful Mr. Dickens recommends John to meet with his friend Seth. But first, John meets a furious Mr. McFarlane in Armadillo's sheriff's office, who is asking for help to find Bonnie. Before they could guess who could have kidnapped Bonnie, a messenger arrives telling them to let go Norman Deeg, the man we captured that was with Bill's gang, if we want to see Bonnie again. John, the sheriff and his men bring Deeg to Tumbleweed, where the exchange is supposed to happen. But when they arrive, the bandits shoot Deeg and attack John and the others as well. Luckily, the kidnappers were no match for them and they are able to bring Bonnie back home. Following the successful rescue, we finally get to meet the beautiful friend of Dickens named Seth, who we find searching for valuables and a treasure map inside graves. John offers to help him look for said map, under the condition that he helps him and Dickens after. John agrees to lure away and distract a deputy, so Seth can get to the man that knows where the map is supposed to be. With the information in their pockets, the two part ways only to meet up again at a church, where Seth needs John's help to transport a bunch of corpses in a wagon. John has to fight off some attackers along the way, but when they arrive at their destination, Seth finally tracks down his treasure in an old mansion full of even more bad guys. But as it turns out, the treasure was nothing but an old glass eye. Still, Seth agrees to keep his promise and help John on his mission. Before that, Dickinson wants our help once again. This time we have to take part in a race. Afterwards we get another tip. We are supposed to meet a man by the name of Irish, who is supposed to get us some extra firepower for our revenge plan. John heads there and has to bear witness to Irish about to be drowned. He frees the man from his attackers and asks him to get hold of a machine gun in return. He brings John to a cabin by a lake where they have to take out a group of bad guys to get to the machine gun. But as it turns out, there is no gun and Irish set us up. John tracks down Mr. Dickens once again, who asks him for another favor, but John is not really having it anymore, as he feels like he is wasting his time. Still, John agrees to help the man once more and protect him from people calling out his scams and takes part in another race. Afterwards, John manages to track down the drunk Irish behind a wooden shed, who is now apparently really guiding the fed-up John to a machine gun. This time at a heavily guarded mine. After fighting his way through hordes of enemies, John finally finds the weapon, and with the help of Irish brings it home safely. Now if that sounds too good to be true, it is, because the Gatling gun is broken. When John confronts Irish about it, he already has a plan to get the spare parts. But first they have to free a man named Shaky from a group of bandits, who gives us the parts in return. Now with everything prepared, the big day of revenge has come. John, the Marshal and their allies meet up to attack Fort Mercer. Seth breaks in first to distract the guards while John and Dickens drive the wagon with the machine gun through the front gate under the disguise of Dickens trying to sell his tonics. When the guards get close, John starts mowing them down with the Gatling gun. With only a few left, the group takes them out by hand, but Williams is nowhere to be found. But before they could wonder about it, Dickens comes running screaming that reinforcements are about to arrive. But John and the Gatling gun are able to fend them off. One of the surviving members of Bill's gang tells them he ran off to Mexico the night before. Irish claims to know the place he is supposed to hide and offers to bring John there, so the two agree to meet up at the ferry. When they meet up, the ferry turns out to be a brittle raft that is supposed to carry the two downstream to their destination. After a wild ride due to them being attacked almost along the entire way, Irish and John arrive in Mexico where the two part ways. John's first stop in Mexico is to meet up with Captain Vicente de Santa of the Mexican army. He tells John about the chaotic circumstances in Mexico and that the military desperately fights to re-establish the order. Even though we only know him for a few minutes, it is easily to tell that de Santa is not a good man. John and his goals align as both of them want to get their hands on the outlaws in the region, so they decide to team up. The first plan the men work together on is escorting a train that the military knows the outlaws will try to rob. The idea seems to be successful when the train comes to a stop after fighting off the attackers. But as soon as the men leave inside, a few hidden rebels appear from their hiding place, stab the last guards and steal the train. John storms out again after noticing and chases after the train, taking out the attackers, before he manages to get the train to stop in front of a blown up bridge. When we come across de Santa again after a while, we witness him being screamed at by his superior, Colonel Alandis, who makes it clear that if he wants help with getting Williamson, John better does as he is told. Which brings him and de Santa to the ruins of an old town, where they have to take out hiding rebels once again. Here, it once again shows that the military is definitely not fighting for their people, as the soldiers capture women to bring them to their captain's home. Further, John is asked to burn down their houses, which he does even though he is definitely becoming more conflicted about his actions. Still, John once again finds himself at the military base, where he witnesses de Santa and his men riding towards another shootout with the rebels. De Santa stops for a moment to invite John to join them. Following another fight, John demands de Santa gives him the information he owes the next time they meet. However, when that day comes, de Santa promises some info only after John goes on another mission in Chuparosa. Here, it is time to protect another train from attacking rebels, but this time we get to use a Gatling gun. Arriving at the destined military base, John's frustration level begins to rise further, as he once again has to leave without any new information on Bill. At least he comes across a somewhat friendly face for once, after dealing with 3 muggers in a small town. an old gunslinger named Landon Ricketts who instructs John on how to use the Deadeye mode before a local banker asks for help with bandits robbing one of their wagons. The two retrieve the wagon and after getting their reward, part ways for the time being. When they once again cross paths, Ricketts asks John to meet him at El Matadero, where they hope to get information about a kidnapped woman named Luisa. Luisa seems to be very important, because as Riggs explains, she seems to have close ties to the rebels' leaders Reyes, which could be John's ticket to getting closer to Williamson. In El Matadero, a butcher named Carlos informs them that Luisa is being held in a nearby cave, and he offers to distract the guards so they can get inside. After fighting their way through countless men, they find the woman in bad shape in a cell deep inside the cave. With the woman back in safety, Ricketts invites John to join him in a game of poker, where he is being accused of cheating by a German man by the name of Müller, which ends up in a duel between the men where John is forced to end his opponent's life early. This causes the town to go nuts and a shootout begins with many people in the small town dying in the end. After that, the two men end up reminiscing about how John left the gang after they left him behind when he got shot during a robbery, and that some government officials are pressuring him now to go after his old comrades. Then, suddenly Luisa comes running and asking them to help some civilians that are being murdered by the local government over trivialities. They rush to their aid, take out the guards, and drive the prisoners over the American border. Here Ricketts promises to bring them to safety and asks John to meet Luisa before they part once more. He keeps his promise and meets up with Luisa being in the middle of packing her family's belongings so they can leave the area. Because apparently the revolution is coming, as Reyes is supposed to lead his men into war with the corrupt army. Luisa asks John for help with getting his sister to safety. With that being done, John drives back to meet up with a despairing Luisa, who tells him that Abram Reyes has been captured. John offers to help, and the two make their way to the prison in El Presidio, where he is being held prisoner. John sneaks inside onto a rooftop and shoots the man who was about to execute Reyes. After reuniting him with his beloved Luisa, John heads towards the Santa. There, Alandis claims that the men we are looking for have been captured and DeSanta will guide us there. He brings John to a church where, as soon as they get inside, the army men betray him and are ready to end his life. But right before our protagonist can be executed, the rebels come to the rescue and save him. With a near-death experience still in his bones, Luisa asks to meet him again. She explains that her father was murdered by the army and she plans to end Alandis' life. John offers his support out of respect for her loss, and the two make their way to ambush a military convoy. With the military line of supply being cut off for now, the rebels make their way to El Sepulcro, where DeSanta was sent to watch over another massacre. The rebels take out the weakened military forces with ease, and John punches Javier Escuela's whereabouts out of DeSanta before he is sent to his maker. John heads over to the place where Escuela is supposed to be, but he apparently hasn't been there in months. With no other leads for now, John makes his way to Abram Reyes and his revolutionary forces. He helps them robbing a train filled with military supplies needed for their attempt at overthrowing the local government. Now with their own supplies replenished and the military forces weakened like never before, the time for the final attack has come. John is tasked with driving a wagon filled to the brim with TNT into the gates of El Presidio to open up a way inside. The few soldiers are no match for them and John goes ahead looking for Escuela. He finds his friend inside a nearby shed. Following a short chase, you are left with the choice to capture or shoot him. Either way, John finally made a huge step towards his goal as the government officials pressuring John tell him that his former gang's leader is in Blackwater. They order him to sort out his business with Bill and head there as soon as possible. But first, John and the rebels have to finish what they started by ending Alandis' rule of terror. Following a brutal last stand, we find out that we might be able to kill two birds with one stone, as Alandis flees accompanied by Williamson. When we finally catch up to his wagon, John and Reyes kill the two and now there's only one thing left to do. But first, John has to get back to America. Back in his homeland, he heads straight to Blackwater to meet up with Agent Ross, who orders John to also take out Dutch if he wants to be reunited with his family. So with no other option, John accompanies the agents to an old shipwreck where Dutch is supposed to hide from the law. The place turns out to be a trap as they only find the injured informant Nastas tied up on the top of the shipwreck. The now quartet fights their way through Dutch's men until finally arriving with their car in Blackwater. Here, John gets to meet the substance-abusing professor Harry McDougal, who is trying to prove his racist theories. Nastas guides the two towards a camp of natives that started following Dutch's beliefs. Here they believe to find the man himself. On their way up to a cliff above the camp, Nastas suffers an injury and tells John to move on alone. At the top, John gets a first look at his final target, but Dutch spots him and shoots him in the head. Luckily, the bullet was deflected by a pair of binoculars and John wakes up at the professor's place. Next, the three head towards a group of Dutch's men that agreed to meet up with the progressively crazier getting professor. But it turns out the most obvious trap in history of traps is actually a trap. The men kill Nastas and John has to fight his way out of the ambush. Back in Blackwater, the professor prepares to leave America and starts packing his things, when suddenly a shot flies through a window and the main man himself, Dutch van der Linde, reveals himself as the attacker. John leads McDougal through a back door onto a rooftop where he fights off the attackers. The two flee towards a small train station and the professor is seen leaving America behind. Back in Blackwater again, the two government agents reveal their plan of assassinating Dutch, who is about to rob a bank. But it definitely doesn't go as planned, and now we and a small group of agents are tasked with freeing the hostages inside. At the end, we actually get a cornered Dutch, but he uses a hostage as his shield. He moves towards the exit, shoots his hostage and makes a run for it. John and a group of agents immediately chase after him. Here they are confronted by more of Dutch's allies, and the main man actually managed to flee once more. So they have to regroup at Blackwater, where they put John on a machine gun at the back of a truck and drive to where they suspect Dutch to be. They mow down his men, but are forced to stop when someone blows up the truck, injuring one of the agents. The men agree that they have come too far to give up now, and decide to keep going, until they eventually arrive at a base in the mountains. In sort of a last stand, everyone that is left of Dutch's gang throws himself in our way, but in the end, Dutch is being cornered at the edge of a cliff. Dutch tells him that the agents won't stop after his death, before throwing himself off said cliff. And after that, John is actually told that his wife and his son are sent to their home and he may finally reunite with them. His worried wife is happy to have John back, and so is he to see them again after all this time. And for a while, John, Abigail, Jack and Uncle begin to more or less peacefully work on their ranch. They buy the cattle as promised earlier by Bonnie McFarlane. John spends time teaching his son useful skills like hunting. He scares off crows eating their crops, helps out the McFarlanes with the corn shortage on their farm, and tames wild horses with Uncle. But in the end, despite their differences, his old friends seem to have been right. One day, Uncle calls for John as he has spotted something in the distance. He orders his son to lock himself in the house with his mother. He then begins to fight off the soldiers attacking his property. They flee inside the house and try to fight off the attackers from there, but Uncle ends up being shot in the process and John decides they will have to leave. So they make their way to their barn. He sends his family out through the back as the front door is being surrounded by heavily armored soldiers. He moves through the front gate, where the two government agents and a few soldiers shoot John several times until he drops to the ground. When Abigail and Jack arrive back at the farm, it's already too late. Years later, we see Jack standing at the grave of both of his parents, before heading to Blackwater to track down the man that wronged his family. He comes across a man that tells him that Ross enjoys his retirement alongside his wife in a cabin by a lake. Jack tracks down his wife, his brother, and eventually the man himself. They end up dueling each other, and Jack finally ends up getting to avenge his father's death. And if you watched through the entire story section, I would really appreciate if you could tell me the most notable thing for you about this game in the comments. For me, it was how versatile they wrote the selfish and actually evil characteristics for every person you meet throughout the game. Like, literally everyone is a terrible person in a unique way. Anyway, first of all, welcome back to anyone skipping the story part. Red Dead Redemption, despite its age, managed to lure me in with its setting and gameplay, and kept me engaged with its world building and especially the characters. And while the world didn't age that well graphics-wise in my opinion, I can definitely appreciate and see the amount of thought and passion that went into creating side activities, NPCs and points of interest. And if you watched until now, thank you for that. I really enjoyed making this video, and especially going over everything once again, so this video is probably going to be on the longer side. But if you still have some time to spare, I would appreciate your opinion on the game in general or my video in the comments. And I hope to see you next time.